This is Ego-Utilitarianism. This presentation is going to be about axioms and self-ownership, in particular the self-ownership axiom. This is a video response to Eagle Eye 1975. He was criticizing me about when I went on one of his hangouts, and I think I forgot what it was because he doesn't have it up anymore, but I'm sure I criticized the self-ownership axiom. I told him, like, it doesn't make sense. It's not a solid foundation you can stand upon to build upon. I mean, it makes you feel good, but that's no reason to adopt an axiom. And he keeps criticizing me, telling me I don't know what axioms are for. And this presentation is going to be basically what axioms are, how they should be constructed, and what their use is, and what their value is truly meant to be. Because I've studied mathematics, and I think I know what the value, how axioms should be constructed, right? And it's not something where you just declare it just because you like it, or it makes more sense to some ad hoc objective you want to do, just like trying to prove rights or trying to make sense of the concept of rights, which don't make sense. I mean, which I'll show in this presentation. So let me start. Axioms and definitions are the foundations of knowledge and understanding. The limits of knowledge manifests itself in the axioms, since they are assumptions, in particular with respect to the people who adopt this set of axioms, as it is impossible to be certain about anything, right? Because everything is deduced from, ultimately, from perception, and perception is fallible. So and intelligence to process the perception is also fallible. So it not only is knowledge uncertain, but creating a set of axioms that explain the world is it's been shown as something, or theoretically it's been shown to be impossible by the incompleteness theorem. Well, ultimately the choice of axioms is arbitrary, and I use the term loosely. Their usefulness is not. Just like solving a system of equations. You can have a system of equations, and if the true goal is to find the solution set to make all these equations true simultaneously, you know, and in this case it's arbitrary. You can select any solution set, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna make, if your true goal is analogous to truth, which is finding the solution set to make all equations in the system true at the same time. There exists objective answers to this. There's objective value here, and you can't just declare things willy-nilly if your true goal is to find truth. So once a well-defined objective is set, like seeking the truth, the value of your axioms becomes determined. And I claim that self-ownership axiom is worthless. If your intent is to make sense of rights, then your goal is not intellectually honest. It's not seeking the truth, right? It's to prove rights, or to forcefully make sense of rights, since it assumes rights are consistent. Since the true purpose of adopting a set of axioms should not be to validate a conclusion that makes you feel better, but instead to better explain the world. That's the ultimate goal of knowledge. It's to understand reality in order to formulate strategy to help your meta self exist, as far as egotism contends. Egotism makes a point to always be careful not to project your emotional meta self interest onto a general rule like morality, right? So you can generalize morality, which I claim takes the form of an equation, right? Determines the optimum set of strategy given whatever object you're talking about. Input an object, it spits out the optimum strategy given a well-defined hypothetical, right? One could just as easily adopt an axiom that says no one owns themselves, which is equally preposterous as the self-ownership axiom, if they were set out to prove your concept of rights were ridiculous. So in this case, I could do something equally as absurd by adopting a goal of setting out to prove you wrong, or to prove rights are silly, just by declaring that no one owns themselves, and then I win by default. It's a stupid way to start a foundation of knowledge, and more importantly, a stupid foundation to formulate a strategy, right? In order to determine how a meta self should act. Morality. Since all logical deduction is conditional on the set of axioms chosen, it is incumbent upon the person who has a sincere desire to find truth and not to validate the silly idea of rights and entitlements, to choose a set of axioms that meet the following minimum requirements, at least as far as I can think of off the top of my head. One, and I think it's kind of in order of importance, be sure that each axiom does not have a counterexample that disproves the axiom. This is the ultimate requirement that should be met. The axiom of everyone owns themselves clearly fails this most important test, and I'll explain later. Also, there should be no proof of the axiom, since it no longer needed to be called an axiom, right? It'd actually be called a theorem, and then you could go on further to make to find your limits of knowledge and create an assumption, right? Okay, so 2, minimize the number or scope of the axioms, right? Or both, right? Really, the scope is most important, since axioms should be assumptions that cannot be proven or disproven, but are consistent with all physical evidence, statistical or empirical. 3, choose a set of axioms so that they are consistent with each other. Minimize the number of contradictions generated by deductive logic. So you want to minimize actually the number of axioms too, because again, oh yeah, that's in 2, because when you minimize a number, it lowers the chance that you get a contradiction between them. So resolve as many perceptual paradoxes and make the best sense of reality, and make the most accurate predictions, right? Cover the ground, and 5, cover the ground not touched upon by axiom, theorem, and law of math and science. Remain mutually exclusive of any other axiom to avoid inconsistencies. I think I went over that. It's kind of redundant. Here are some of the axioms of ego-utilitarianism that satisfy the rules above, right? So here's an axiom. All math axioms, theorems, and all laws of science, and to a lesser extent economics, are compulsory axioms. Deduction. Therefore, evolution exists and is the mechanism that determines existence at any one point in space-time. Axiom. Concepts exist by default. So see, it's like seemingly true. I mean, this is an axiom that concepts exist by default, or they don't, right? They're constructed in some way by something, and it doesn't make sense if you adopt the other. So this one makes more sense, but I can't mathematically prove it. So this seems like a good choice for an axiom. Axiom: only well-defined statements have a true or false value, can be proven or disproven, right? So I don't know. I just wrote this, and it seems true. I think by the incompleteness theorem, I can't prove this, but I think this is kind of like incorporating the incompleteness theorem, or the fact that this statement cannot be proven, something. So taking that as an axiom, somehow resolving that dilemma by with this axiom. It would be unfair and intellectually dishonest for me to adopt an axiom, I'm always right, just because from my perspective it's true and proves you wrong, right? It's not intellectually honest. I'm here to seek the truth. Unlike you, and you accuse me of not pursuing the truth. And if you would actually watch one of my videos, right, just like my theory on property, which resolves all the dilemmas that you're concerned that you think rights are the only solution to, which is a fallacy, right? To think that a concept of rights is the only solution and is the only thing that leads to an argument against government is outright fallacy, right? And the fact that you didn't even give my one of my videos a chance, like on property itself, which resolves like the need for a stupid concept like rights. It just shows how intellectually dishonest, and for you to just cast all these criticisms that are poorly aimed and not well applied. If anyone knows me, they can tell you almost every conclusion you reached about me is false, right? You think I'm trivial? No way. I hate history. I hate trivia. I love math and logic and analytical ability, and I've criticized others for being trivial and just stating anecdotes or something. So if you claim that that's the self-ownership axiom proves rights, then you have to explain the fact that rights have no value and no one provides them, right? Again, difference between rights and ability and what happens when no one's able to provide them. What's the value of rights? And on a two-man island, rights seem to vanish, right? Which shows that rights are a status or religious concept. It needs either a god or society to provide them, right? On a two-man island, if you got a guy who wants to steal from you, who are you going to present your claim to ownership to, your rights to, right? It seems now it just shows how absurd the idea of rights are, and the fact that you don't realize it, but you're relying on a government when society's so big, you take it for granted, right? But when you reduce it to a two-man island, you just see how absurd this idea of rights and self-ownership. So the fallacy that, and you also claim that if I reject the self-ownership axiom, then I necessarily say it's moral for you to beat me up and take my stuff. First of all, you have to have the ability to do so, right? So I claim that ability and will, and then evolution are what's important to analyze what's actually moral here. Just the fact that I claim that not everybody owns themselves doesn't mean that's to say that everybody should take everyone else's stuff. That's an absurd conclusion to come from one of my statements that I say not everyone owns themselves, and I have a specific definition of ownership which clarifies all economic analysis and all moral analysis, and I claim morality and economics are the same. So brainwashing wasn't my case. So you claim that like the brainwashing counterexample that that wasn't mine. That was your other guess. That wasn't mine. I think if I remember correctly, my counterexample was that I could sever your spinal cord from killing you, right? I mean, that obviously shows that there can be a case, and there are cases of this. People have killed people, and their self-ownership was quote unquote violated. And if it's really an axiom, it's a statement. It's not. You're not making a claim of self-ownership rights, right? If you are, it's somewhat weird, because if rights are not provided and someone killed themselves and no one's there to punish them, what does it mean? What do rights have? What value do rights have? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There has to be some meta-selfish reason for someone to provide rights, which I always claim. So at any point in time, people can take over self-ownership of another simply by murdering or imprisoning them or enslaving them, right? The right to defend yourself is meaningless. Your ability to defend yourself is not necessarily sufficient to defend someone else's ability to violate your rights. I doubt Jews had the self-ownership right back in Nazi Germany, or black people back in the American slavery days. Why did their rights vanish, right? And you can claim they existed, but no one defended them. So what good are they? Eagle Eye 1975 is just projecting his self-interest on morality, which just shows he feels he should be able to keep his stuff, right? So I'm claiming he wants to be able to keep his stuff. Therefore, and that's the basis of his analysis. I want to keep my stuff. Therefore, let me argue for rights and self-ownership. I own myself. I want to believe I own myself. It's a feel-good statement. But the sad fact is, people can take it from you if they have the ability. I'm not saying they should. Again, the ability to do something is not an ought, right? And I make this clear. I've said it before in conversations in the past. A bias toward wanting to own oneself. So that's what I claim he has. Also, he fails to transcend all the status and religious bullcrap that was inculcated into him, and truly pursue truth. He's not really pursuing truth. He wants to convince himself he's right. He wants to make him feel better. He wants to be able to own his stuff. it's just a selfish projection. Yeah, I want to own my stuff too. Yes, I would like to believe I own myself. But the sad fact is, government at any point in time can take me away and violate this axiom. You can't violate an axiom. Then it's not an axiom, right? I mean, if it's easily violatable, if it's easily shown as false, that's a counterexample. It's not a valid axiom. I can't claim all dogs are red and find a non-red dog. That violates the axiom. You can't. You're claiming that it's a right. You mean that's and then now you're back at now you're back at your dilemma of proving rights. Now it becomes circular. Self-ownership rights don't prove rights, right? So again, you gotta distinguish between rights and axioms. And I don't think you know what the role of axioms are. It's not something you just declare willy-nilly. So if you want feel-good axioms, I can just adopt axioms like I am the best, or I never lose an argument, or value is subjective, right? These stupid axioms, some of them, probably 2/3 of them are true, and the last third is wrong, right? The reason I referenced Hop, he claims that I compare him to this guy. And it's because Hop made the most compelling logical argument for self-ownership and still fell flat on his face, right? Still failed miserably since he tried to prove a clearly false claim. And that quest is quixotic, right? It's a foolish goal. And you didn't even listen to my property ethic, right? You didn't even listen to my replacement for property rights or self-ownership axiom, the exclusion criteria of property. I have a video on it. I have several videos on it. And it shows how property is determined in a free society, or how property is determined in any hypothetical, even a statist one, and how it not only says the positive definition, but it also says the normative definition, how property should be allocated, and it should be allocated to those who best utilize it and participate in society through market trade, right? As far as intellectual integrity is concerned, you lose that argument as well, since you admit you're out to prove the concept of rights in your video. You want to make sense of rights to justify them. You're not set out to know the truth, right? You set out with the assumption that rights are the only solution. And that's a fallacy, right? You've never considered any other option. You haven't even watched my video, let alone considered options that may exist. You're assuming rights, right? Rights are your axiom, not self-ownership, under which self-ownership is a subset of rights. Also, as a determinist, one can make a compelling case. You don't even control your thoughts, right? How can you own if you think you control yourself? One can make and this is the determinist thing is just a cherry on top. I don't even need it. This is not a substantial part of my case here, my logical case here. It's just something that, if you're not convinced, this is another one that you have to address. I don't even have to invoke this, since my previous arguments are more sufficient to transform the self-ownership axiom into a bona fide self-ownership fallacy. And yeah, so if I appreciate dialogue, right? But you better understand my case before you argue against it. I've studied the self-ownership axiom enough, and I've studied mathematics. I think I know what's a valid argument and what's not, and and I know how to identify the value of a set of axioms, right? And yours is the self-ownership axiom doesn't hold up to even number one, right? Be sure that the axiom doesn't have any counterexamples. There are counterexamples for people not owning themselves. You got to throw it out the window right away. And the fact that you've chosen one shows that you don't know what axioms are and their use or value, or how to evaluate them as far as determining the truth or making sense of reality. And I'll conclude this video for now, but anyone who wants to respond or comment or criticize, comment down below, message me or whatever. I have a Facebook, Ego Utilitarianism, the group, or Egotism. you can contact me there. Thanks for watching.